For years, eyewitnesses have been seeing mysterious upright canine creatures that they cannot describe, and has left many mystery into the world. It is unknown what lurks around into these creatures, but with sketches, drawings, and thousands of accounts, the mystery is. Join us as we talk about Dogman, the most terrifying cryptid in the world.
Tonight's guest on the Ten Tales of Dogman is a researcher from Pennsylvania. His name is Brian Seech, and we got a lot to talk about tonight. Very good researcher, and it's going to be fun to hear what he has to say about the amazing cryptid known as Dogman. Brian, thank you for coming on the show tonight. It's great to have you here, my friend.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. Let me ask you, interestingly enough, from where you're at, you probably have one of the best hotspots for Dogman activity.
Yeah, we're actually in Beaver County, which is in western Pennsylvania, for all the listeners out there, and we do have a lot of sightings. We live in a place called Beaver County. We've had some in Beaver County, up in the Mercer County area, right above us. We've had a lot of sightings, and over in eastern Ohio, there's been a lot of Dogman activity also.
One of the most interesting cryptids, and you happen to be in one of the best heartlands of the activity. That's an honor right there, my friend.
Yeah, it is. It is. I tell you what, it is a very weird phenomenon, the Dogman phenomenon. I think there's many layers to this that we don't understand yet.
I will say this, in me researching this thing and taking a look at the backstory of this thing, I can say that I've only reached, I think, about 20% of what we've learned in this field compared to the other 80% that we haven't learned. And for the past 30-something years since we've heard about this creature and we go through the backstory, we've only learned, I think, in my opinion, 20%. What do you think about that? Do you think that too?
Yeah, we actually started researching the phenomena ourselves, our group, the Center for Cryptozoological Studies, in 2007. So we actually found out about the Dogman phenomena through Linda Godfrey, one of her books, Hunting the American Werewolf. And we lived in a place called in Mercer County at the time, which is from 97 to 2000. And we didn't even know when we lived up there was a phenomena that they called the Shenango Valley Werewolf. And it shocked us. We were back here in Beaver County then, and when we found out about it, and nobody ever talked about it up there. We didn't know anything about it until after Linda's book came out. So we started researching it. We did a couple of cases over in Cuyahoga Falls in Ohio, and then we started doing some cases here in Pennsylvania. And wow, to say that there's a giant wolf-like cryptid that could be running around, it's still mind-boggling to even think about it. To be honest with you.
And you know what? Before we get into that too, which we'll get into in a brief second, but going to what you just said, it's crazy because when I first started researching this stuff myself, I was pretty blown away because at first I assumed werewolf, and then I noticed that the patterns of the sightings seemed to be less and less more of that lore, and that we're dealing with a creature that I personally would not want to run into on my normal hike day. I will say that. I don't know about you, but I would certainly not want to have a field day with this creature.
Yeah, I would not mind seeing it from a distance.
I agree.
And it's something rather easily escapable, if you know what I mean, in a vehicle or something. But from all encounters, even some of the eyewitnesses we've talked to, it's a very scary proposition to actually see one of these creatures. It's, not like seeing a Bigfoot as bad, because we mainly do Bigfoot research. Although we research all the other cryptids also, but there's just more sightings of Bigfoot. We don't get a lot of the Dogman sightings, but we know they're out there. People just don't seem to want to come forward with them. I mean, they are more and more since '07, but some people are still reluctant to talk about them.
Absolutely. And now going into that, because one of the big things in this field with ridicule and the facts of being uncomfortable because of how the controversy with the discussion of this creature is, do you believe that people that do not, like what I just said, do you believe that people do not want to discuss their encounters, their stories because of the trauma and the fact of being ridiculed, or do you just think that it's they fear that if we talk about them that they'll come for us? Like, what's your take on that?
I basically feel that they don't, mainly the ridicule factor. It seems like, especially with Bigfoot, more and more people, they're coming forward with their stories from Bigfoot because, they watch shows like Finding Bigfoot and things like that. So Bigfoot is more mainstream and it's been seen a lot longer. But yeah, you tell somebody, you know what, you're not going to believe this. I saw a giant upright walking wolf the other day. I mean, it's like, hey, what have you been smoking, man?
Right.
So yeah, and also, they're not only do they get, ridiculed. There are some people who have even claimed that, yeah, I'm afraid to talk about this because if I talk about it, somehow this thing's going to follow me. People get very paranoid on this subject, or very scared, very paranoid, and I can see why. I mean,
yeah, and that's something that I think what we've learned from our various people in the field, the best and most important thing is to not to show the fear when you see one of these things. I know that's a very tough thing to admit and to take, and it's a tough pill to swallow. But I think if you show fear to one of these things, they feed off of that. What's your take on that?
I'll agree with you on that one. You're reading some of the the reports like Linda Godfrey and other my good friend Jody Cook. They've said too that it almost seems to want to intimidate you, to scare you. Because it is an apex predator, and some people have stood up to it. There's been a lot of reports that these creatures have been shot at, and not been killed. So when you shoot at them or you seem to stand your ground, they don't seem to attack or be as aggressive. So I would agree with you on that.
Right, absolutely. Now let's get into some of these encounters that you got. Brian, fire away. If you want to start from your very first encounter, go for it. The idea, whatever we got to share for the audience tonight, what they want to hear from your history books, from when you first started on the research, on all the way up to your first encounter and whatnot. Fire away, Brian. It's the spotlight. The show is all on you, my friend. So please, without further ado.
Well, yeah, one of the first sightings that we got, as an organization, was down at the Ohio Bigfoot Conference. Our friend Jody Cook had said, yeah, I have a eyewitness who claims they saw this thing look like a giant wolf. So we went and talked to the eyewitness, and she lived in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. So we went up there and we checked it out, and she took us to the spot where she saw this thing. Basically, the story is she was driving down the road at night about maybe 2 a.m, and she sees this creature, which she described as being like the creature in an American Werewolf in London, as it was kind of changing. It ran on 2 legs across the road. She caught it in her headlights. She said there was actually patches of skin, but there was fur and there was skin. It looked wolf-like, and this was interesting. It ran right towards. There was a field, and there was a huge power substation there, and kind of like on the outskirts of town. It wasn't very rural. And we also, when we were there, we checked out another sighting, which is maybe about 3 miles down the road, which it was kind of rural, where this creature was seen. The gentleman was driving a truck, and this creature saw it and ran across the road into a field. And next to the field, there was allegedly another power substation. So we also got a report in Westmoreland County of, again, this creature running across the road, and in this case, there was a fence around an electrical power substation, and it actually crawled and went under the fence as he drove by. So that was 2 sightings and 1 sighting that was close, that these creatures somehow were going near, for some reason, like an electrical power substation. And we also got another report, which was in Lawrence County, of a daughter and her mother, who we know, they were taking a walk in the cemetery because they would walk in the cemetery to get some exercise, and the mother says, "Hey, I want to finish my walk," so she goes over the hill, and the daughter's in the car. Well, as she crests the hill, there's this massive thunderstorm coming with lightning and things like that. Well, this creature, it was a smaller creature, about 4 foot tall. It looked like it was a wolfish type creature. It was stalking the car. It went around the car, growled a little bit. She had a small dog in her car, was barking at it. And she was really scared, and this creature only walked around maybe, I don't know, maybe 25, 30 seconds, or maybe a little bit longer. She wasn't sure of the exact time. And just as her mother crested the hill to come back, this creature went into the woods and disappeared. The mother got in the car, and a huge thunderstorm happened with real massive lightning, a lot of electricity. So again, there's another sighting of, hey, there's either electric or some kind of energy around when these creatures were sighted. Now we've had other reports where, like up in Shenango, where some kids in I believe it was in the fall of '90, and then in '92 saw this large dogman creature standing next to a pole, and another time it was in the woods. And they claimed again it was like about a 7 foot tall, because we measured the pole. Got the gentleman who's an older guy now took us to the exact spot, and when we were there, it was in late summer, and the weeds were really high. But I stuck my hand up above, and we measured. It was about 7 foot tall where this creature was standing, and the eyewitness drew a drawing of the creature, and almost kind of looked like wolfish with almost like a lion mane. It almost looked like a mane. It was very well detailed. So there was other reports the secondhand reports that a creature was in the area, which we were never able to get other people to confirm. So those are some of the encounters that we've had. Now we have not had a lot of encounters. The last one that we actually received was actually about a year ago this month. It was up in Crawford County, where one of my friends, Jamie, knew this eyewitness who saw this wolf-like creature on the side of a road up in Crawford County, PA, going towards Erie. And this creature was starting to get really close to the car, and it looked like it wanted to touch the car. It was early morning, maybe 7 o'clock, and the eyewitness and her boyfriend just sped down the road. And we talked to him, and he goes, I hate to say this, this thing looked like a giant wolf, but it was walking on 2 legs. And he goes, I can't explain what it was. He goes, I'm a long-time hunter. I've seen coyotes. I've seen bear. And I know what a wolf likes. This wolf looks like this thing was about 6 foot tall. It was walking towards the car and almost kind of scratched the car type thing. So again, it doesn't make sense. Science says that these things don't exist, but people are still seeing them. It beats me what these things are, to be honest with you.
I gotta agree with that, and I'll dive into the next question in a second. But going back to your reports that you collected, and you mentioned the energy field of when they were seen at a nearby power station. Do you believe, in a contrast, that these creatures feed off of energy as a source of to manifest? And I know that kind of sounds like it's going into the supernatural lore, but do you believe that there's a fascination with a power station or a power line with these creatures that they are fascinated with? Do you have a theory or an idea of what makes them intrigued? With thunderstorms too, lots of sightings are seen in thunderstorms, but with power stations and all that, because there's a few reports that I know of that have that incident. Very similar case, except that they do tend to actually try to break into the power stations, if I'm not mistaken. But do you believe, though, with the power stations and whatnot, do you have a source or anything like that? Do you have a theory of why they do that?
Well, I know that the researcher Barton Nunley, everybody knows who Barton is. He's a cryptid researcher out of Kentucky. One of his reports was there was a farmer out in a field in the summertime, and he looks in the field and he sees this almost like a shimmer or a haze, like when you're driving down the road on a hot day and you see that little a haze, like a mirage, on the road. Well, he sees this in the middle of the field, and this dogman creature steps out of it, kind of of looks around, sniffs a little bit, and sees the eyewitness, and apparently it kind of growled and showed its teeth, and it stepped back into this thing, and then it disappeared. It appeared and disappeared out of this field. Now, could this thing be an interdimensional creature? I don't know. I like to just put it out there that, in some of these reports, not all. I mean, some of the ones that we've got, there seems to be a connection to some kind of energy field, but in most others, I don't believe that there is. But it does give you pause to say, hey, are we not dealing with a total flesh and blood animal? Could it be some kind of interdimensional creature? That's up for debate.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. I am a little skeptical about that as well, which I'm not afraid to admit. It's because I feel that we have very little information on the flesh and blood, and then we have very little information on supernatural. But if we want to cut down to the basics, we're still trying to identify with Sasquatch as a flesh and blood creature. So I would think that we're still trying to cover in all the blanks of the puzzle. For the flesh and blood, and going into the supernatural, I would not assume it would be a supernatural creature. I would think that maybe more of along the line of a skinwalker or a wendigo, or perhaps another supernatural creature. I mean, what do you think about that? Do you think that they are flesh and blood as a creature, or do you think that these supernatural type occurrences with them are actually that of a skinwalker or a wendigo?
Well, it seems when people see it, when it's actually sighted, it's sighted as a flesh and blood creature. Every rule is a bear or any other animal in the woods. One of our favorite sightings, our sayings here in Pennsylvania is, where did it come from and where does it go? It's, even with some of the Bigfoot sightings, these creatures appear and boom, just as quick they're gone. I'm not saying Bigfoot's an interdimensional creature, but there are some researchers who think that. We deal with a gentleman named Dr. Paul Johnson, who's a chemistry teacher out of Duquesne, and he talks about, being a quantum theory, how you have to have an observer to actually see these things, and, where do they come, and then where do they go? So, again, when I tell people, I'm like, I'm on the fence about it. I make no qualms about what it is or what it could be. I want to research it and get as much information on what it could be, because I'm really on the fence about it. Right down the line, if I had to, I would say they're more flesh and blood than not flesh and blood, but not that much. I mean, just maybe barely over the line.
Right, and that's something that I myself am coming to terms with, but also at the same time I keep an open thought about it with the flesh and blood, because there's a lot to it, and I think it's unknown right now, because we're still in that early development stages of where it's becoming a topic of interest, like Mothman for the past 50 years, like Sasquatch for the past 200. So, I mean, it's getting there as a huge cryptid topic, and that leads me to my next question with you. Do you think that this creature could overpower, and it could actually turn above and be the number one cryptid in the field, overpowering and surpassing Sasquatch?
I don't think it will ever overpower Sasquatch. Sasquatch is basically a pop icon also now. I think there's too much for it to ever overtake a Sasquatch. But, could it move up to, say, number 2 or possibly 3? Oh, yeah, definitely. I don't think it will ever have the popularity, though, of a Bigfoot. It could be, probably right now, it's probably one of the hotter cryptids, because there's a lot of new groups. I know myself, I'm a member now of the North American Dogman Project. I'm a point of contact for Pennsylvania with Jody Cook's group. And they're becoming huge. They're getting information all over the world, all across the country, on sightings of these creatures. So, I think right now is kind of like the golden age to be a dogman researcher. So,
the golden age of the dogman world, and then for the future, the silver age and the bronze age. So it's a good time. I have to agree with you, Brian. It is a great time to be a dogman researcher. I think the hottest for the past 2 years and ongoing is a great time to be a dogman researcher. Now, going into my next question is in the regards to the case with the cemetery. Now, there is a lot of reports that I've read where these creatures have been seen at cemeteries. These creatures have been seen walking among cemeteries. Now the creature that was seen by this individual in the car that she described as being a 4-foot creature, do you think that was a pup? Or do you think that was probably, like, do you believe that there's, like, dwarf dogmen? Like, now I know that sounds funny, but, like, I mean, you know, if these creatures have similar traits to us as human beings, you would assume that they have a genetic feature that would make them a little person, a dwarf. Or, do you think that this was a pup, or do you think it might have been, like, an adult dogman, but, like, a dwarf that had this, like, the little dwarfism issue, like, disability or whatever? I mean, I'm just trying to put it in the right category without trying to make it sound like I'm insulting. But you know, like, do you think that this was like a pup dogman, or do you think it was like one of those a dogman that had a genetic feature that was a dwarf or a little person?
It's the only one that we've ever really gotten that is of a smaller creature. All the other ones are about 6-7 foot tall. So. Hey, your guess is as good as mine on that. I couldn't even, begin to guess, and it kind of, she claimed that it kind of, looked, more wolfish, but it wasn't quite. Maybe it was maybe possibly a juvenile or something, but it was such like a weird report because all the other ones were almost of the same stature and what they look like. So, boy, again, I hate to not give you information, but it's like I just don't know. I know that's not a good thing. Maybe it could be, being it was the only one. It was of a smaller one. So, possibly, your guess is as good as mine on that.
Absolutely, and you know what I mean. This is what makes us. This is what gives us new questions, but it gives us new theory. So that's always a good perk about it. See, I wouldn't know how I'd react if I saw if there was a dwarf dog man, if it was like 4 feet tall or whatever. I mean, I don't know if I would be more intimidated at the fact that it's a little dog man that might be a pup, but it might have the attitude of an adult. And I mean, I don't know how I would personally be able to sit there. I mean, I don't know if I should, be afraid or just know that this thing could easily gather around with the elders and kill me if it chose to. I mean, they always, I guess you could say, in a contrast of the biggest little men or the bravest little men, but at the same time, for a big guy, I guess for the old saying of the bigger they are, the harder they fall, I'm pretty sure that this thing could overpower me if it chose to, if it was a dwarf dog man or a pup. But of course, too, with pups, the parents would be near, I would assume. So going into another discussion would be with the cemetery thing. And I know I kind of overlapped the question a little bit. With the creatures being seen in cemeteries and whatnot, do you believe that they're trying to bring out the presence of the dead, or do you think of the Native American lore with cemeteries that they are there to protect?
If I had to guess, probably would be more maybe the Native American aspect of it, for protection, or maybe just coincidence. Maybe they're just out there and they just happen to go through a cemetery. Going through a cemetery to get to another part of the woods, or just going through. I know these creatures, they are seen near Indian burial mounds a lot. They're seen by crossroads. They're seen by water sources, caves. So, and I agree with you. We're still in the gathering information age, I believe, in Dogman, whereas, Bigfoot, we've had, over 50, 60 years of gathering information. I still believe we're still in the infancy of finding out about a lot of these things, and through great researchers like Linda Godfrey, Jody Cook, Vic Cundiff. These are the kind of the pioneers in dogman research, and every day, every year, we're getting more information on them, and I think it's important just to keep gathering that information, and maybe we'll have a better pattern and seeing what these things actually are.
I agree. I think to light the fuse, or to get the gas to light the fuse, I would have to say those three are probably the most profitable and most understanding, and the forefathers, I guess you could say, in the Dogman world. If there was a Mount Rushmore for three, I would put those three on that Mount Rushmore of Dogman.
I agree.
It's crazy how 30 years ago, basically 30 years ago, the first reports came out, and now we have almost, if you look at the archives, probably about a good, if not more, and this is just a hypothesis, at least about 2.5 million, if not more, reports in the archives, and that's going by maybe 10,000 we get in a year to maybe about 50,000 a year. I mean, these are poor hypothesis guesses, but right now we could have a sighting go down, and this could be reported to the local NADP charter or to a researcher or a group tomorrow. It's very compelling to see where it's turned into with this field, with research, and it's a good thing to kudos on. And of course, kudos to you for what you do in the research world.
Yeah, we're just trying to get answers. We all believe that we may all have one answer, one little piece of a puzzle, and if we put it all together, then we'll have a better picture of what we got. Yeah, I mean, this is why I like to read a lot of reports. I like to read different books. I like to listen to some shows once in a while when I get a chance, or watch the documentaries. I'm trying to learn everything I can, or about something that's what's still kind of exciting about the Dogman research is there's more and more people getting into it every day. Also, when we started in 2007, there was basically Linda and Jody. Now you got groups all over the place, and you've got websites up, and you've got people actually out there looking for them. Whereas before you didn't. Somebody would say, I saw a Dogman. They laugh at you. We were one of the first groups around here, the Center for Cryptozoological Studies, who would actually give a presentation and include these Dogman sightings. Everybody around here only talked about Bigfoot. Now we're talking about Bigfoot, and we're talking about gargoyles and thunderbirds and everything else with it, not just Bigfoot anymore. So I think people are starting to see that there's a heck of a lot of weird things out there other than Bigfoot.
I agree, and the phenomenon is going to just increase. It'd be the future of what we see in Dogman in the future, and mentioning the Golden Age, the Bronze Age, the Silver Age, and whatnot. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see where the research takes us in another 60 years, especially with advanced technology and whatnot. Which leads me to my next question. With the technology we've got today, and of course, the technology, I'm going to put it on the quote-unquote with the higher power, do you believe with the technology we can use nowadays, like drones, or like one of the like typical in general with advanced trail cameras, 360 cameras and whatnot, GoPros, do you think it's easier now to get evidence compared to evidence that we couldn't get really much of back in the early days of when this was just becoming a thing?
Oh, in theory, it should be a lot easier because you do have more people out there with cameras and, with deer cams, cameras, camcorders, dash cams now, and my gut tells me there's already some great footage out there. It's just being held onto or not given to the public yet. Probably same with Bigfoot. I see what happens when somebody puts a picture or posts something on any kind of social media. They're immediately attacked. Oh, this is a hoax. There's nothing to this. They're like cannibals. So if let's say that my neighbor has a great, the clearest cut footage of a Dogman. Before he lets it out, he goes on media and he sees what other pictures or what other people are posting on Dogman. Hey, I got a picture of this. What is it? Some of these people are attacked unmercifully. They might say, hey, I don't need this. I don't need to post a picture or something, and people are going to attack me for it. So I think my gut tells me there's some really good footage or some good information that, for the time being, until maybe it gets more respectable or in the general community, that it'll come out. So again, I could be wrong, but my gut tells me there's already some good stuff out there.
Oh, I agree 100% with that. Brian, other additional encounters you have to share, please feel free to showcase them. Any other encounters that you have that are like all encounters are intriguing, but do you have anything else besides what we're going into with theories and discussions and whatnot in the Dogman realm?
Well, we had one here in our own county, in Beaver County. It took place about 7 years ago, 7 or 8. I don't have the report in front of me, but there was a Bigfoot encounter like straight down the road a couple years after that. But the encounter goes that there was a trailer next to like a little mini swamp, and a lady went outside of her trailer because she had, and the next trailer was abandoned. There was kittens under there, and she kept hearing the kittens meowing, and she wanted to go feed them. So she goes outside and she looks across her yard and sees this giant dogman creature staring at her. Well, she got really scared, and she ran in, and closed the trailer, and this creature was walking around the trailer and making growling noises, and the boyfriend was scared. He didn't want to go out there, and so this happened like for a short period of time. Then the thing was gone. Then the next morning, they went out and they smelled this rancid smell, and they didn't see anything, but they went to the next where the next trailer was, and all the kittens were gone. So, did this thing kill and eat the kittens? Or are they kittens so scared that they, ran away? But they never came back, so they never did find them. Those are probably some of the better, we haven't gotten a lot of reports. I think we have like a total, about 9 or 10 of them that we've actually, and when I say reports, these are the ones. There was another one in Allegheny County up towards the airport where, and I personally knew this eyewitness. I work with her. She's a longtime hunter. She was in the Air Force. Real tough girl. She was a hunter, so she knows what wolves look like with deer. She was going to work early one morning. It was about 6:30 or 7 in the morning, and she goes off of this off ramp, and she looks and she sees this giant thing she says it looked like an upright wolf, and it walked into the guardrails, and it walked into a small patch of woods. Now there's not a ton of woods around there, but she told us in a couple of days we went and checked it out, but it was real dry, and she took us to the exact spot where she said that she saw it, and we didn't see any evidence. We looked for any evidence of prints or anything, but there wasn't. It was a really dry. This was about 2 years ago now, I think. It was just a really dry, like 2 weeks in a row, and there was no way of finding prints. That was another interesting one that we had. So, again, I think we've only gotten like 2 in the last 3.5 or 4 years, maybe about 3 years. So, they're not, now there's, in the eastern side of the state, they're getting some alleged reports, and they're calling it the Lichen Loop. There was one that we investigated up in Clearfield with our friends Dave and Carrie of a wolf-like creatures on the side of the road. It was eating roadkill, and we checked that out with them, and we walked the woods, and it was in Erie. It was by an old Boy Scout camp. It's about a mile from an old Boy Scout camp, and it was a really, really weird forest, though, really dense. It was like those big, thick trees, and we got there. It was about 2 weeks after the effect, so we actually didn't find any evidence on there, but it did give you a creepy feeling. One of the few times where you go into a woods and it was a creepy feeling in the woods. So does that mean anything? Probably not, but we thought that was a pretty good encounter.
Yeah, those are interesting and compelling. Unfortunately, when other animals are involved, especially when you look at dogs and cats and whatever, I mean, there's always the what-if factor. But when you look at it in a nature's perspective, and that's what a lot of people out there got to realize when we're dealing with these creatures, you don't want to feel your hate because it hurts another animal with this creature, especially because you don't want to do something stupid with this creature that will result in a catastrophic event, which will be traumatizing and will be life-threatening. And at the same time, going back to that trailer story, did those folks ever leave that area, or did they ever encounter anything else besides that incident?
No, the lady broke up with her boyfriend, but she still lives in an exact same trailer. This was we investigated this one 2 years ago, so she's, as far as I know, from 2 years ago, she's still there. So they haven't had any encounters that we know of to date because we gave more information for them to contact us back. Now, you hear secondhand, we're looking into some possible stuff up north that may be happening, but as of right now, that's kind of where our investigations are at this point. Until we like to actually go out to the area, and we have our eyewitnesses fill out a very detailed reporting form. When possible, we want them to draw what they saw. We try to get as much information as we can on what they saw, and you try to assess if they're telling the truth. And normally these people who bring us out to an area, spend all the time filling out a form, we believe they're not trying to hoax us. We believe at least what they believe that they saw. What this thing is, I mean, I still don't know what it is. I still can't wrap my head around it. So, again, it is a phenomenon. You guys know it's all across the country. Wisconsin, Michigan. Michigan has the Michigan Dogman. Ohio is a big state for these creatures. Pennsylvania, out west, they have sightings out west also. So, in other countries that they have creatures like Dogman, like in I think it's Argentina or Brazil. It's called the
Lobazone, yes.
So, the Rougarou down in Louisiana. So, are all these fake? Are all they just stories? It does make you wonder if they're all just stories. But normally stories would die. People wouldn't keep bringing stuff that they're seeing. So, I think there is some truth to it.
I will say this: if everyone who's told a story is BSing, that would be the biggest mind. You know what? Then bigger than Inception. If that would literally be like a huge 180 on the whole concept of what we do here in research and whatnot. It'd be scary too, because it would just go to show that we put our life's work into it, and it's like, well, gee, I mean, now we feel dumb. Excuse me. And with what you've collected as in the field so far, have you had encounters at all, or have you just heard the guy that just hears it and just documents it and just throws it out there?
Well, like I said, all the cases that that we've got to other than the one that we got to like about a week after, they're a little bit older cases. So, I mean, we've never had any encounters with anything that we believe is Dogman. A lot of our night offs are usually for Bigfoot because we're in an area with historical sightings or a creature was just seen there. So, but no, unfortunately, we have not had or maybe fortunately, maybe it's still while I'm talking to you, huh? Maybe if I had an encounter, I wouldn't be here. But, again, if there's an area or something that's happening, we're going to try to get to it as quick as we can and, hopefully find some evidence of it.
Yeah, I agree with that one personally. Now, going into a little bit of history with the area, where you stand, is there any history behind the areas you live in, where you live, like Native American history, perhaps maybe one of the reasons why this creature might be intrigued by your area and in general the sightings you collect?
Well, there's a lot of Native American presence here in southwestern and eastern Ohio. There was even it was in a Fate magazine article about there was an Indian tribe who actually worshipped the wolf, and they had wolf teeth and things like that. And up in Shenango Valley, that's there was a huge Indian presence up there. So possibly. The whole area there's a lot of Bigfoot sightings up there too. They even get a lot of UFO sightings up around the lake. So, is there something to some of that too? It's again, it makes you wonder. There's actually a lot more questions and answers about the whole phenomenon.
And that's at the end of the day why I guess for right now our generation in the Dogman world is just gathering more questions than answers. I think we can put that to a T. Now, when you come across an eyewitness and you probably have a code that you know if someone's making up a story or not. When you speak to these eyewitnesses, does the presence of when they tell you the story, does it feel very like a creepy atmosphere? Like, do you feel the presence that when these people recite the stories, do you feel like it's almost as if the creature's there observing the retelling? Like, do you feel like you're being watched, is basically what I'm saying. Even in general, when you go out into the bush, like, do you feel that presence of just being watched? And you know when you're in the woods and you feel comfortable, but if you go into the woods and you feel a presence of being watched, like, how does it feel? Like, do you feel that at all?
Well, we've actually felt that really intense on one occasion, but it was from, we believe, a Bigfoot encounter, a possible Bigfoot being there down in Salt Fork State Park. And we were basically, it was during their huge conference weekend. This was probably about, 6 or 7 years ago now. We had a couple of our members already at this place called the Handicap Shelter. And myself, my wife Terry, and Dave Rupert, our friend Dave, we pulled into the parking lot. And he had his vehicle and we had ours. Terry and I got out of our vehicle, and Dave got out of his vehicle, and we walked maybe 3 or 4 steps, and we all literally stopped. And we looked at each other, and we said, something's not right here. Something hit us like a wave, like, wow, something's here. So we go walk over to the shelter, and as soon as we got to the shelter, they said the same thing. They said, something's not right here tonight. There's a different feel. We feel like we're being watched. It was a weird feeling. So we went back to the car. Dave and I, we had night vision, and we had a parabolic. We walked up and down the road, and you felt like something was watching it. Now, again, we didn't see anything or hear anything, but it was very, very intense. Like something was there, and you really felt that, and it was very, very uncomfortable. And we went back to the shelter, and in about 20 minutes, it's like somebody flipped the switch and everything is right. Then you start hearing noises back again in the woods, or normal night sounds, and you felt like, wow, everything's okay. And it was really, I have never felt that in all my time in the woods looking for all these creatures. That one night was very intense, and it was shared by about, I believe there was a total of 7 people, 7 eyewitnesses. And after that, the whole rest of the night was nice and calm. It's just a beautiful night being out in the woods. So was there something there? It sure as heck felt like it. It really did. As far as some of the eyewitnesses, you can tell when people have had an encounter so bad that it physically affects them. The one encounter we got from Westmoreland County was actually, we were at a PA Bigfoot Society function. That was a group that I used to be in for Bigfoot, and was at a picnic, and we started talking about Bigfoot, and then I just read, one of Linda's books, and I'm like, you know what? I said, I'm just reading this book about somebody claiming to see a thing that looks like a werewolf, and this gentleman right next to me just suddenly stopped, and he looked at me with this look in the face, and he goes, oh my God, that's what I saw in Westmoreland County. And so we talked with him, and we got his report, and we weren't able to go out there to the encounter, which I still want to go out there. We just, I kind of lost his stuff, and then I found it again, and we're trying to get back together to go, even though it's an older report. The look on his face was like a look of terror. It was like, oh my God, I actually saw what looked like an upright wolf run across the road. Because that's what it looked like, a werewolf. Because that's what we kind of, we didn't use the term dogman right then. It said, look like a werewolf. And that's what some of these people, we like to call them dogman ourselves, but as a point of reference to people who, you say they look like what a werewolf looks like. Your typical Hollywood werewolf. And just to see some of these other eyewitnesses saying, you might not believe me, but this is what we saw. It's very intense. Any researcher that's listening to this about any kind of cryptid or anything, whether it be ghosts or anything, you know if these people are telling the truth, or if they're trying to bullshit you. And the ones that we've talked to, again, there haven't been a lot, but none of them have given us any reason to believe that they didn't believe that they saw something. So, you've probably interviewed your share also, and you kind of know.
It's almost as like it's a police interrogation, but it's a kindly interrogation to where I always tell people, it's like, look, keep in mind that this is going documented. It's going on a record, and do not BS me. Do not tell me a fake story, because do understand, it's going on record, and that's when you can identify who's telling a fake story and who's not, because they'll sit there and they'll pick their words wisely if they're telling a fake story, and they'll just tell you straight out, like, I swear to God, I swear on my family that I saw this thing, and I do not know what the hell I saw. That's how you can tell the two opposites of who is telling truth and who's not. And it can be done in different contexts, but that's why I ask, because, and it comes into a contrast with how these people, with how they tell their stories of the fear, and they tell it, and how they fear of being watched. Going into it, have you revisited any encounters at all from any of the collections you've encountered? Well, not encountered from you, but like the eyewitnesses. I apologize. I kind of threw the question around. Have you revisited any area that any eyewitnesses have told you since their encounter?
Now, we've been up to the Shenango several times, not to that exact spot. We've been closer to the lake, which there's been rumors that they've seen them around there several times. So, again, we haven't had any evidence from some of the times we've went out. But some of the other ones, no, we haven't really got back there because, you get busy with life and other new cases and, everything else. So we probably should try to check some of those sites again, but it's kind of the thing. Okay, well, we've got probably all the information now. If we get a sighting anywhere close, then we can revisit it. But it's usually just a matter of time, being able to do it.
Right, and I agree with that. And that's an honest fact too for a lot of people out there who are new to the field. Now, going into the Shenango Valley, the history surrounding that place, do you believe that this is it's almost as if it's like a nightclub almost. It's like, do you think that this place is the ultimate hotspot for not just Dogman activity, but for other creatures as well, such as Sasquatch, possibly the Mothman if he decides to make an appearance there, and ghosts even? Like with Shenango Valley, like the history about it, do you, like, if you could, like, would you like a little bit of a brief history on the Shenango Valley? Because a lot of people don't know about that, which is a shock.
Yeah, I believe our friend Jamie King, he lives up there, and him and his wife Jenny, they hike that thing 3 or 4 times a week, and they've talked to some secondhand eyewitnesses who claims they've seen some dog-like creature there, and a lot of Bigfoot sightings. They had a Bigfoot encounter there where something screamed at them very close, and it kind of like, he was never interested in Bigfoot until that happened. They just loved hiking the lake. I think it was the Lenni Lenape tribe lived up there, and around the lake, and there was a lot of. I think the lake is from called Shenango instead of Shenango. That was the name of a chief up there, and there's a river going in there, the Shenango River into Shenango Lake. So and there was also stories, and we interviewed a couple eyewitnesses of a little creature that they called the dog bull. Okay, this happened in 1955, where an eyewitness who was a young girl at the time, her mother and 5 other kids are walking down this road, and they hear this. It sounded like a howl, and they see this little. It's this hair-covered person run down the road and grabbed the eyewitness and tried to pull her away. Again, she was a little girl at the time, and her mother grabbed her, and all the kids were screaming, and they ran one way, and this little creature ran the other way, and this creature was seen for a good period of time around there, and it was called the Dog Boy, Shenango Dog Boy. Well, we did some further research on it, and there was a house at the end of the road that allegedly this boy lived, and allegedly this boy and the family moved, and they moved up to Erie. and on Peach Street. And some of the eyewitnesses we talked to, and the legend up there was this boy who looked like a wolf. We believe he had hypertrichosis, which is called werewolf syndrome. Because apparently he had, his one eye was drooping and it was reddish, and his hands were like, they weren't really hands, they were almost like cloven. We believed he was a malformed boy who had hypertrichosis. And the interesting thing is, apparently he was like, I think it was in the basement. There was bars on the basement, and there was a red light in the window. Now, we're thinking, why a red light? It's like, well, did he have an eye condition why his eye was red, and they had to have a red light on? So then you put two and two together, it's like we believe that, unfortunately, this was not a werewolf boy or anything, but it was a child who was malformed and had hypertrichosis. So, doing some research on that, we found that interesting that, there was sightings, but it wasn't and it got kind of blown out of proportion, and there was allegedly there was a coven of witches there, and they summoned this creature up and to protect the area, but we believe that it was just, again, unfortunately, a little boy who had some major problems.
And yeah, that sounds pretty much up there with that case. It's scary to imagine too. I mean, if you truly think about it, for that terror, not just on the fact of what the boy has, if the case would be going, what he's dealt with, but it's in a way sad too. They can't really go out and enjoy life dealing with that. But Brian, we're almost near the end point of the show, but I wanted to go ahead and ask you a couple more questions before we close off. The Dogman encounters that you have collected, is there any one of them to you that would stand out to be the most ultimate one or the most inaugural one that stands out in the most terrifying way, but the most important one with evidence or backstory, or more importantly, just in the detail of what the people saw?
Well, probably the one Shenango or the in Farrell, which is in Mercer County, which is close to Shenango, the lake, of the boy and his friends seeing the one by the pole, because he drew it in detail, and some of his other friends I really tried to. A couple of them had passed, and several of the other ones would not talk to us about it. They were almost kind of like scared if they talked about it, this thing would come back. So I think that and the 92 encounter, which basically they saw it in the woods again, I think those two are probably the two of the better ones that we've have on record.
I would agree. Those are two very terrifying encounters. Going into the discussion of Sasquatch real quick, do you believe that this creature and a Sasquatch seem to be... Could they build a trust or a bond, or do you feel that they are a feuding cryptid and it's mostly over territory? Do you believe that in any of that at all, or do you believe that they are just creatures that could easily be seen with both one another, but in their own retrospect with how they discussed? It's almost as if it's like, hanging out with someone from a different country.
Well, I know that Linda Godfrey, she has talked about, up in Wisconsin, where there's Bigfoot reports, there's no Dogman. And when there's no Dogman, where there's Dogman, there's no, and vice versa. So these creatures apparently do not, if you go by what she said, that they do not cohabit at the same place at the same time. It almost like they don't get along. It would be a heck of a fight, though, I think, if they would, if you would ever see one of those two fight. I'd still go with Bigfoot, I think, but he'd probably be pretty battered at the end. Oh, yeah.
It'd be an interesting fight, only you'd see in the pay-per-view in the wilderness.
Yep.
My final question to you, and coming from what we've researched so far, do you believe that science, or more importantly, the higher power, or whatever you want to call them, do you believe that there will be a revelation, perhaps maybe down the road, where they will admit that these creatures do exist?
I don't believe that they would admit it unless they would really have to. Same with Bigfoot. I really think that they know about Bigfoot, but they don't want to come out with it. They don't want to... scare the tourism industry off for campsites and things like that. I I think it would take a major act if these creatures actually were flesh and blood. I think it would take a major act. They would only do it. Just my gut feeling, unless they had to. Again, to try to protect, not to get, try not to scare people. I mean, it would be a scary proposition in these state parks and things like that. If you knew there was a werewolf-like creature stalking the woods, it would do. I mean, it would change a lot of things. So I think unless they would have to, they're not going to admit it.
I agree 100%. Honestly, like we've both kind of touched base on, it's just the whole concept, I think, of if it takes the president of the U.S. to get mauled by one, or if it takes someone from the cabinet, or in general someone on Congress to get mauled by one, to know. But that's why.
I think they would cover it up. They would say it was a bear or something else. I would think unless they would try anything possible to divert the story. If they haven't done it already, if there haven't been attacks and people killed by them already, which I do not know that there has been, so I can't comment on that.
Right. Well, Brian, I mean, basically, for this interview and for future interviews, I'd love to have you come back and discuss some more discussion on Dogman. Before we do head out, though, would you like to give the audience a little information of where they can contact you, what email, what websites, links you've got, and of course, ladies and gentlemen, they'll be seen in the description when you check out the episode. Check out Brian's, where you can contact Brian, where you can reach him. So, Brian, please fire away. Where can we reach you at?
Sure, we have a Facebook page. It's the Center for Cryptozoological Studies. It's on Facebook, and just how it sounds, Center for Cryptozoological Studies. If you want to email me with any sightings or any information, it's going to be one word. It's going to be Center for cryptostudies@gmail.com.
And that very good. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, if you are in the Pennsylvania region or in general the Ohio region and would like to get in contact, Brian is, of course, a researcher in the NADP on the Pennsylvania region, if you want to get in contact with him and discuss things with him. And, of course, Brian, I would love to have you come back, possibly do another episode, perhaps maybe on a different platform other than YouTube. And I would love to have you come on and discuss some more Dogman. There's a lot of questions I still got, but for now, I mean, for what we've discussed tonight, I would love to have you come back and do another one, my friend. I'd love to hear from you more, and I'd love to hear a lot of what you got to say, a lot of your theory on Dogman.
Oh, yeah, anytime. I enjoy myself, man, and whatever you want.
Absolutely. And before we close the show tonight, Brian, do you have any advice to anybody out there in the field, or anybody who might be tuning into this episode as an enthusiast when it comes to research with Dogman, or in general with Dogman?
Well, I think if you're out there, go out there with a group. You probably should be armed. I don't think that this is a cryptid to take lightly by any means. Very unpredictable. You definitely have to be careful with this creature. Do your due diligence, your interviews, your field work, and if anyone's had an encounter, please report it to somebody. Any information that you give to researchers, could lead to some bigger evidence down the road.
Amen to that. Well, Brian, you know what? Thank you, my friend, for coming on the show tonight. Thank you for taking the time to discuss your stories. And, of course, thank you again. Amazing guest, thank you for coming on.
Oh, you're welcome, and I really enjoyed it. So, you have a good night.
Thank you, Brian. You have a fantastic evening, and I will talk to you soon.
All right. Take care, Chris.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Well, folks, there you have it. Feel free to contact Brian with the links in the description down below. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a like and subscribe for more future content. This is the Venomous Fringe, and we are here with the 10 Tales of Dogman miniseries. We will see you next week. Everyone, stay nice, sleep tight.